Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quest, a journey into true crime and the paranormal. I'm your host, Misti Gaither, and I am just so happy that you have chosen to join me here for this really cool episode. So, how you been doing?
Well, I've been hanging in there. Have two new kittens and their mama added to our house. So the past several months have been basically just awe and like just hanging out with cats.
Right, and now I do because I do my research, and you have Watson, and then what is that? Lestrade,
Lestrade, yeah,
and
and
Mystery.
yeah, we adopted their mom too because she was barely more than a kitten herself, and she's a really sweet girl. And everybody has integrated nicely, and the boys are very cuddly, and it's been a wonderful distraction from everything else going on in the world.
Being, of course, a doting parent and posting like lots of videos and playtime and this and that up, with them. So I just think, how that they say, like, if you have an aquarium, and then some people, they feel the same way about kittens and puppies and stuff. And it really helps you to distress, and with so much going on in the world and just how things are sometimes, it's really good to kind of have that soothing, re-energize, and just kind of concentrate on that.
Well, and a year ago in April, I had promised myself to do at least a cat a day post. Like I
Mm.
was really struggling with being online, and so much of my job involves being at least somewhat present on social media. And rather than just constantly rant about stuff, I was like, I will post at least one nice thing, and that will be a cat picture. And it's just usually like some quirky thing that they're doing around the house. And I've actually managed to keep that up for over a year, every single day.
And you know what? That is no easy feat, I'm sure, because, sometimes, I'm supposed to be posting more than what I do, and I kind of get distracted by shiny things or whatever, and just kind of go off and have to kind of regroup and get back in the groove of things. But I mean, for you to post something every day, almost every day, I mean, that's amazing to have that commitment to do. And do you see a difference in kind of how that you're handling things online?
A little bit. Like I'll get into a funk otherwise, and I just avoid people for like weeks or months on end. And this gives me a reason to at least be present for a little bit. And since it's something that's just lighthearted and happy, yeah, it actually kind of sets the tone for my whole day.
Well, good. Let me ask you something. Now, you were saying how sometimes that you get in a funk and you kind of want to step back from people and all that. I go through that periodically too. Do you think that has, in your opinion, do you think that has something to do with being a medium?
Definitely, I'm an introvert by nature. Like I prefer animals and nature to people in general, but there is a psychic component to that where people are really overwhelming. They would be overwhelming for me if I wasn't psychic, but if you add the level of just being able to pick up what they're feeling and what they're thinking, at least even pieces and parts of it, like it just sometimes it's just too much information all at once, even if you're shielding or just the effort to shield. So yeah, I go through periods where I just want to cocoon and like find something that I can shove my brain into to the exclusion of all else. And sometimes that's writing a book, and sometimes that's making a game, and sometimes that's just playing a computer game.
I find myself doing that too. Like I'll kind of veg out or kind of on the phone. I have a couple of games that I'll play, but it kind of gives me that escape, I guess, from reality or from, like you said, having so much noise going on that you just kind of have to step back sometimes and regroup within yourself so that you can tackle things for another day. And I don't see anything wrong with doing that. I mean, you can only take so much mental and spiritual and, you know, physical, because I think what some people may not realize is that being a psychic medium, it affects you mentally and physically sometimes too.
And I pick up a lot of stuff in dreams and dreaming. So like I'm working even when I'm asleep. So sometimes that's just more than I really, especially when there's a lot going on in the world. There's just a lot of just ambient stress, anxiety, suffering. Like it's just sort of free floating, and finding ways to sort of create a bastion of peace and calm for myself. I will do whatever it takes. And fortunately for me, that mostly just takes go for a walk or write some poetry or play a video game.
I definitely do understand that. Now, I noticed that you've been doing some remote work with Katrina Weidman on her show Travel the Dead, and I watched the episode that when y'all were, you were there remotely, but when Bobby Mackey's, has been torn down now, and y'all were one of the last few, maybe one of the last three groups that were able to be in the old building. So tell me how, for those of you, I mean, Bobby Mackey's is Wilder, Kentucky. It's been such a presence and such on a lot of people's bucket list to go and investigate. Tell me about that investigation.
Well, it's a little weird because when I am doing remote work, it feels more real to me than just physically being there because I experience it wherever I'm at from a very different, like a 360 perspective. So for me, remote work is incredibly present and intimate. It's actually how I prefer to do readings. I'd never been to Bobby Mackey's physically. I'd heard, bits and bobs about it. And of course, the arrangement that I have with Katrina is I have no clue where they're at. I can, reasonably predict that they're probably within the tri-state area, Ohio, Pennsylvania, maybe over in New York, maybe West Virginia or Kentucky. But, usually she's in Pennsylvania. But what the way we work it is I get a pad of paper in front of me, I get a pencil, I may sketch stuff out, have her call up, and we've gotten to the point where she just tapes over the camera on her phone, so the only thing I'm getting is audio, and then I focus on Katrina and basically try to shadow her in the location, like physically where she is at physically, I am psychically. Bobby Mackey's was interesting. Like I seized on the well that wasn't a well, and
Right.
That was a little confusing. Like I kept getting like all of these like, there's a well, Timmy fell down the well, but it's
Right.
not a well. There's
Right.
weird stuff, and there's just it's kind of a disaster, and there's probably body parts down there. And I'm like, what? Where are you? What's going on? The one thing that was really striking to me, remembering my experience of it, was I was aware that I was seeing several different time periods kind of layered on top of one another. And where I was perceptually was an older version of both the land and the building before things had gotten built up, before there was like the highway and stuff there. But there would sometimes be like flickering images of what was present currently. And one of the challenges on my part when I do readings like that is to try to sort out like what, first of all, what layer is important, and second of all, what layers, like what belongs to what layer. Because like I get the sense of like something zooms past, and I'm like, but that's not what I'm seeing with this weird sort of like, there's an outdoor scene, and then there's like this little old little house that's a cabin that's somehow also inside a building that just seems like the most ridiculous thing to say out loud. And then they're like, no, that's totally a thing.
Mm-hmm,
There's
mm-hmm.
an old house in here inside the old building. I will say I didn't get. I know a lot of people ascribe a lot of demonic activity
Mm-hmm.
to Bobby Mackey's, and I also recognize that like my bar for like what I qualify as demonic is pretty high,
Mm-hmm.
and there was some funky stuff and some dark stuff, but nothing that I would have classed as demonic appeared to me or interacted with me. My focus just got pulled into that well, and that's kind of like where I stuck the whole time.
You were just amazing to me because you were even picking up how that there was pieces of wood stacked up by the well, or and this and that, and because a lot of people, when you go, from I mean I haven't been, but from all the shows that I've watched that's been there, and a lot of them focus on the Pearl story, that with her head being thrown down in the well, and then they're not even sure that even occurred, or if it even occurred there. And then you were picking up, what I thought was interesting was you kept picking up like a small boy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still know going on with the boy. Like sometimes when I'm doing this work with locations, a spirit that is either one of the ghosts or is kind of a representation of like something connected to the land, will often present itself to me as sort of a tour guide.
Hmm.
And I I'm never, I won't say never. It can be difficult to be certain if that's an intelligent spirit of a human who passed who is just reaching back to me because they find me easy to communicate with, or if it is, in fact, more of that sort of genius loci, like the spirit of place that is manifesting to me like a small boy who's like, here's what you're going to associate with a well and with this time period, what's
Hmm.
important. Yeah, I still don't quite know. He was very present. He was very communicative. I'm curious, but like, did he have a story? Was he somebody who died on or near the property, or was he um, that sort of spirit of place? I'm not entirely sure.
Has he appeared or anything to you since then?
No, it was just that particular location.
Yeah.
Like doing the remote work, the steps that it involves, it helps to have someone that I already have a connection to, and I have a pretty strong connection to Katrina.
Hmm.
So I focus on feeling her empathically first. I just pick up on Katrina, and that gives me it's sort of like painting a bullseye in the location. Like she's my beacon,
Hmm.
and I can travel to where she's at, then I can start expanding my perceptions around her. And if you've watched Travel to Get Dead, that can be very physical. Like I often in my mind see the physical space around Katrina as she's moving through the space, architecture, doorways, the color of the walls. It's wild,
Hmm.
honestly. Like people are like, "Well, how do you do that?" I'm like, I just do. Like
Right.
I wish I could give you like, a solid scientific theory for how and why that works the way it does, but it just does. And Katrina's patient enough to like go through the footage and be able to like see the timestamps of like they're literally like walking right past an architectural detail that I'm describing
Right.
and trying to figure out why it's suddenly relevant. And it's just because they were looking at it.
I just think that's amazing, to have that, that ability to the remote thing. That's something that I hope to work on one day. But, it's, I think like you were saying, it makes it even better or more, or even stronger because y'all have such a connection and known each other for so long. So that really like plays into, like you said, picking up on the environment and everything, just like you're kind of seeing through her eyes. And I just think that is really, really cool to watch you do that. Now you're starting to do some, I think it's May the 16th you're going to be doing, or you've already started doing like some secret, uh, what is it, secret history series? Um,
Yeah, with my Patreon last year, I did a yearly tarot course. So every month I did a different class on the major arcana, and this year I used to give this lecture in a much abbreviated form at colleges and universities around the country, and it's basically occult history,
mhm,
all the secret stuff that we don't learn about, figures that we definitely learn about in school. So the one coming up for this month is going to be Benjamin Franklin, a founding father. And, folks know that he was a Freemason
mhm,
and, obviously like a polymath and an inventor and a diplomat, but he was also a member of the Hellfire Club, which is this secret society that, depending on who's doing the research, was either like a weird fraternity
mhm,
or actually an occult organization. And he also was uh, basically like a myth buster. He was one of the people who went to investigate Franz Anton Mesmer and the claims of mesmerism
mhm.
to either confirm or debunk it. So he had an interest in these things. And we don't really get to see or hear a lot about that when we're studying him or hear about him in school. It definitely is biased from where my background is. I am teaching mostly about just oftentimes assumed to be white, straight Christian guys
Mhm.
who are historical figures, because we don't get to hear how weird many of them are. Like, we have this sort of, I don't know, rubber stamped image of them. I focus on a lot of literary figures. So we started off with the poet W.B. Yeats,
Mhm.
who was a very, very accomplished occultist. My favorite thing about Yeats was one of the things that he wanted to do was meet up with his friend, an Irish rebel, Maud Gonne, go to one of the sacred sites in Ireland and summon the spirit of the land itself to throw off English rule.
Wow.
And you never hear about that when you're
No.
just reading Yeats's poetry in school. But like, it's all in their letters. Like, it's not, it's an open secret. So like the whole year, once a month, we get to delve into who believed in reincarnation, who practiced witchcraft, who had table rapping sessions in between writing great novels that were taught in every literature class. What are their secrets? I dish the dirt. There's usually a lot of kind of gossipy stuff about their lives in there too, because they're just really complicated figures, and I love that complexity.
I remember, about like you were saying, how we learned in school, about Benjamin Franklin. When we think of him, we think, well, I think he invented what bifocals or electricity, and I think he even did the folding chair, and he was the one that was kind of pushing the turkey to be the national bird, and we grow up with that hymn, right, with the kite, with the key, and the ball, and stuff. And then I remember the first time I heard about him and the Hellfire Club, I was like, what? Like I just
Yeah, right.
couldn't, like,
Well, and we
I
still
couldn't
don't have
fathom
like a
that.
solid
Right.
idea of what on earth they were doing down there. Like it could go either way, especially with what was going on at the time, like 1700s. There was an occult revival. There was a lot of really wild stuff, and yeah, no, it's just fun to dig into this flip side of history that we rarely get exposed to.
Now you can go to michellebelanger.com and you can sign up for these the series, and she has different classes, different her books, even autograph books. I mean, music, just so many things that you can have to enjoy it. And it's at Michelle Belanger, or as you said, Belanger. When you're
Yeah,
writing it out,
Belanger.
right? MichelleBelanger.com, and check it out. It seems really, I mean, I know that it's fascinating. And Benjamin Franklin, did he do his stuff, like when he was in on U.S. soil, did he act one way, or then when he went to this Hellfires Club, did he just like kind of let it all loose, and or was he like that way here? Just who knows? You have to like tap into the class to find out all of this.
Yeah. And
We're not
what was
giving it
going
to
on
you
with all
free
the
right now,
skeletons?
no.
Yeah, and all the skeletons in his basement in his old house in
And you said
England.
literally.
Literally.
Literally. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole thing that.
And you did about Mary Shelley, something on them
Yeah, no, I
too?
I, well, I love the Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley,
Mm-hmm.
Polidori Byron circle, and just all of the stuff that they got up to, and really like how we're still feeling the impact of that in science fiction and horror in every aspect of literature. Like that circle just made waves. Let's see, we've bounced around. Yeats took us back. We looked at Bram Stoker
Mm-hmm.
and Sir Henry Irving, and not just folkloric vampires, but the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the connection to Irving and Stoker and their circle, and the belief in psychic vampires that was part of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's teachings,
Mm-hmm.
and where some of what we recognize as traditional vampire powers are definitely influenced by actual occult beliefs of Stoker, and if not Stoker, his friends and associates who were part of the occult revival in London in the 1880s.
You've written several books on different subjects, and I was looking over about the Ghost Hunter Survival Guide, and I don't believe that we touched on it a lot when you were here before. And
Mm.
the what you get into there is, because I go on, paranormal investigations also, and you don't think, especially like when you're first starting out, and then I think a lot of investigators, like, they're on this chase for this high, trying to find, like, we'll get this spirit and we'll find it and we'll communicate with it, and I think that what happens is we don't realize, a lot of us don't realize what we're inviting in,
Mm.
into our space, because, the way I was raised and stuff, it was like, you certainly couldn't do none of that, but especially like the Ouija board. I mean, I only recently used a Ouija board. That's how much it was pounded into my head. But,
Mm.
but yet we can't, like, it's frowned on for, the Ouija boards and stuff like that. But then we don't think anything about summoning or wanting to communicate with spirits using a phone app or using like
Yeah,
an
or a
SP.
K2 meter or ominous,
Yes,
and it's all essentially doing the same thing. It's just the Ouija board has worse PR thanks to the extra and the warrants.
it needs a better publicist. Yes.
I mean, it used to be a parlor game, and it totally was a way of basically finding a way to get very physically comfortable as a young man with another young lady. You were allowed, like, it was a two-person game. You
Hmm.
could be very close to one another. If anybody said anything inappropriate, it was just the spirits.
Yeah, right. Good one. Yeah. So, we don't think about that. And so we're like, we're using this stuff. Okay, can you tell me your name? Why are you here? Are you evil? All the questions that's asked over and over and over. And I'm sure sometimes the spirits are like, I swear if I have to hear this question one more time, I'm just going to scream, and we forget that everything that presents itself as good isn't good. And we forget that there are lingering effects, and so, I think it's a good idea to, to cleanse your equipment to, in yourself right after investigations, because sometimes, I am guilty of sometimes forgetting to even cleanse, like cleanse myself, or I'll cleanse myself and forget to, cleanse my equipment, and you're still bringing it home with you because it's still used in this way. So you feel the same way, that we don't know what we're inviting in. And so it's if you are just starting out as a paranormal investigator, then it behooves you to do more research on how to, for spiritual hygiene, I think, and how to, to not bring all that home with you, or because it'll affect you personally too.
Yeah, well, I ended up writing the Ghost Hunter Survival Guide in the early paranormal state days, because the one thing that I noticed right away was the majority of people who were ghost hunting, especially back then, there were the paranormal investigators, and then, like, I worked with pagans and folks who practice magic and witchcraft, and the psychic community, where spiritual hygiene and psychic self-defense was sort of a given. Like, you learned to ground, center, shield before you did anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But in the paranormal community, people mostly, especially back then, were just like asking the question, could ghosts be real? And they didn't have the toolkit
Mm-hmm.
of cleansing and protection and shielding, didn't even think to go in with it. So that's my psychic self-defense book. That's my book written to be like, okay, if you're going to do this stuff, here are the things that could go wrong, and here's how you make sure that they don't go wrong. And it's fairly simple stuff to do before you go into an investigation, as you come out of an investigation. And if you have been called into a place where someone is in distress because they feel that they're being attacked, here is how you diagnose that and ideally treat it. So yeah, I was trying to give people the toolkit and move it from the place of magic and psychic development, and bridge that gap, because it was funny in the 90s and early aughts. There was a huge gap between those communities. It's changed since, but back then, like, you couldn't, a lot of folks could not be openly a witch or a magical practitioner
Mm-hmm.
among their ghost hunting crew, because the ghost hunting crew thought that was like a little too dark or occult or dangerous. Like there
Right.
was a lot of misinformation. And it meant that people weren't sharing their different specialties and ways of approaching stuff. And there's a lot of useful tools that are over on that other side. And I wanted to find a way to not sanitize them, but like reframe them
Mm-hmm.
so ghost hunters could benefit from an approach to cleansing and protection and, again, psychic self-defense.
Let me ask you this: do you think that sometimes that we, um, the paranormal investigation community, do you think that these apps and this equipment is used more of a crutch instead of
Mm.
using the best equipment that you have, which is yourself? Do you think that it's, to me, like,
Mm.
as a medium, and you may feel the same way, we know what we feel, we know what we see, and I can tell you what I feel and see. But some people, unless that they have it, the flashing lights and the words and everything that they can physically see and hear, they're not going to believe always what we
Mm.
have to say. And so is the equipment more for the other people, or is it like, sometimes I think it's, just in my personal opinion, I use it, so I'm not going to say, I don't agree with it, but I just wonder sometimes if it's more of a crutch.
When I was younger, I was violently opposed to the
Mm-hmm.
use of technology for a number of reasons, not the least of which being just you think your camera is going to photograph a ghost. Like I'm not physically seeing that. Like there's so many layers to things of it, there's a lot of assumptions for how the technology works. And it's always been interesting to me that people are very skeptical about psychic abilities, but they do not apply the same skepticism to what is often, honestly, pseudoscience behind most of the technology that's used for ghost hunting. So there's that issue. Um, I do think that we're very visual people. Like humans are. We like to see an immediate response. Like we want to have something hit that dopamine trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not psychic or sensitive, a flashing light that lets you know that there might be a ghost in the room is instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that can become a crutch. My bigger concern for paranormal investigation is for too many people, I think it's just a lark. Like it's not necessarily something that they take seriously. On a certain level, on some level, most of them don't really believe that they're talking to a dead person because I would hope, like, if they were, they would probably be more polite and they certainly wouldn't be so mean. Like
Mm-hmm.
so many groups will go in and like ask things to relive their most traumatic moments and then mock them if they don't respond,
Yeah.
and like try to incite. And so there's this disconnect where the phenomenon is not treated as if it's objectively real, sentient, and has feelings. And I think that technology can kind of help facilitate that because it gives you this very bare bones thing. It's just wires and electricity and an EMF meter and things that beep at you, and it's fun. It hits the dopamine meter, but it doesn't feel really real.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for a psychic, it's in your head. And I don't mean that as in all in your head. I mean, it lives in your head. You feel this the same way you feel your emotions, the same way
Right.
you feel your visions, your dreams. You can relate because you can feel what they're feeling. And it's much more real. It's definitely not a game. Um, that said, I think that there's a place for the technology as long as we use some critical thinking about what types of technology we're using and ask hard questions about how it works
Mm-hmm.
and why it works and who programmed it to do what it does. As generative AI and things become so much more widespread and useful, I was actually just thinking about this earlier today, where there's like all the ghost box and the ghost apps.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at what point if somebody takes generative AI and just attaches that to a ghost box or a spirit box, and it's basically Chat GPT talking to you through the ghost box, that's not a ghost.
Right, right.
That's AI like reciting the hamburger of phrases that have been put into its program.
Mm-hmm.
But your average person's not going to be able to tell the difference. Like there's people who actually use Chat GPT and generative AI and like actually think that there's something talking to them, as opposed to a plagiarism machine that just took, thousands of books and is giving you the statistically probable phrase that it's programmed to assume that's what you want to hear next.
Amazing how, because if you think about the technology that's, I don't know, even 10 years ago, and now, like we have the apps on our phone, and it'll do the spirit box, the thing, and, the white noise. And
also makes me like sensory wise.
Yes, it is a lot.
That's really a lot for me.
And now it's like go, and there's people, and I'm not trying to disparage anybody or to talk bad about anybody or whatever. That's not my intent. But it's like, a lot of groups put all this kind of money, I mean tons and tons of money, into this equipment, trying to prove that there are spirits and that they are communicating with these spirits. And now it all boils down to cat balls. I mean, that's the thing right now, is cat balls.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just me? Like you just put it there and then nobody moves, and then if it goes off, and then the first thing is, did you move? Did you move? Nobody, no, we didn't move. And then it's like, well, something must have made that cat ball. So of all the tens of thousands of dollars that's been spent on, the communication, is we're back to we're back to something simple, cat balls.
Well, and I think it's important to think like a lot of the technology is technology that was made for some completely different purpose that has been repurposed for ghost hunting. And the people who repurposed it, the designers may understand the logic by which they're applying this other thing. Like, I'm not saying that you can't take a theremin and the concept of a theremin and turn it into a ghost detector, a la the REM pod, but most people who are buying a REM pod probably don't know what a theremin is,
True.
How it works, and therefore won't be able to recognize false positives. So my biggest critique of all of the gadgetry is, if you're going to use the gadgetry and like really rely on it for your idea of proof, you need to know what that gadget is proving. How is it designed? How do you get false positives? How do you assess those false positives? And approach that with the same level of skepticism that you would with somebody like me walking in saying, I feel the presence of a young boy in the corner. Because not much difference between me and a REM pod at that point. Like, you need to know, where's it coming from? Why? Is it biased? How do you rule out that bias? How do we judge this information, which is going to be a little suspect, or it should be a little suspect? All of it. Right. Not just the tech and not just the psychics, all of it.
Yeah, and that, and my point with me saying all that, spending the tens of thousands of dollars, is at the end, it all comes back to the simple things, to the, the communication, of it, the most simple and inexpensive thing that you can do. It's like we've got to the place where, we can do the Estes method, or we can, like I said, spend tens of thousands of dollars on a piece of equipment that can, that says these phrases and gives you grandma's recipe for her buttercream cookies or whatever that they are. But in the end, it's that simple voice or the simple understanding of what you're doing that separates that from the truth. Like when you're seeking the truth, and at the end, like I said, all the money that's spent, you have the cat balls. That's the going thing now. So just to prove a point, it's going back.
Yeah, long before Paranormal State, the first paranormal investigation team I worked with was the Avalon Foundation out in Ohio, headed by Nick Ryder, who has since passed. And Nick was an electrical engineer, but also liked to go really old school with his types of ghost detection, which involved things as simple as casting a little bit of flour
Mm-hmm.
on the floor and in places where you thought things were supposed to be going so that you could rule out rodents or people or anything else that like something physical would leave an actual bit of evidence that it was there messing around with things.
Right.
My favorite thing that Nick had made was literally like it was just this little, it was a copper cone topped with a needle that had a copper propeller on it, and it was underneath the bell jar. And it was under the bell jar because the propeller, with any like wind at all, would move. But in the bell jar, there was nothing to move it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's this physical thing that's just put together, and he would have the spirits move the propeller. And quite a lot of times we would get hits with stuff like that, or with something else in a bell jar where it's just like a pendulum, but instead of having a person holding the pendulum where you can argue ideomotor response, you put it on a flat surface, you put the bell jar over it, you have a level that you can physically see in case anything is tipping, and then have them interact with this suspended object inside the bell jar. There are a lot of like really low tech things that you can do that are still interactable and have a lot higher of a threshold for the margin of error. And you definitely you're sitting there looking at just these physical items as opposed to something that's been put together with circuits and programmed with like 50 different response words, and you don't know what all those words are. These things were very easy to understand, to explain to people, to assess whether or not there had been physical interference. um, so yeah, if it really comes down to it, I'm kind of all about like old school 1800s style ghost detection.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so please don't come after me, y'all, because I said that about the equipment or whatever. And it's just an opinion, and sometimes it's good. It doesn't hurt anything just to be quiet and listen to
Like,
the spirits and just
toys are appealing, they're wonderful, but we are also, I mean, you started off with something that I agree with too, which is we are also probably our most powerful detection device.
mhm.
Understandably fallible, understandably subjective. And so we always need to take what we are perceiving with a grain of salt. We should record that as immediately as possible when we have a perception. We should find a way to communicate out loud, and we should try to communicate the actual perception rather than interpreting it. Because once we start trying to make it make sense, we often run into trouble. But don't underestimate when we've been, in many ways, seduced by the siren song of a quick fix with an expensive piece of equipment. Don't underestimate the fact that like you are your best detection device first and foremost.
Yes, totally on that. Everybody, Michelle's written some very amazing books, like the one we've been talking about, The Ghost Hunter Survival Guide. She's also wrote one, Haunting Experiences, about different experiences that you had on investigating cases. Like I'm really excited about the Benjamin Franklin thing coming up May the 16th in her Secret History series. It's Forgotten Tales of the Paranormal and Mystical Experiences through history. And so go on to michellebelanger.com and sign up for all this. Get you some autograph books, everything. It's You can't go wrong, I promise you. And even you have music, so one stop shop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it can be a little overwhelming. That's my one apology about the website is there's a lot. I wear many hats. I get bored quickly, and I write very swiftly. So there's a lot of stuff.
Well, nothing to apologize for, because that is, believe me, that is, in my opinion, the way to be. Uh, I appreciate it so much that coming back on the show. It's been a year. I hope that it doesn't is not that long. If you choose to join us again, and uh,
Mhm.
so like I said, I really appreciate your time and for for being here and talking with me.
Oh no, it's always a pleasure. Really, just poke us because I lose track of time. Again, I will just get focused on what I'm doing, and then months go by, and suddenly it's 2025, and
Yeah, here we are though. Everything works out
yeah.
for a reason, and here we are. So I do appreciate everyone watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to me, and I will see you next week. Have a good night.